Morning, Will. How are you this morning?
Man, it's good to be here. I'm doing pretty well. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. It's always an honor to get to talk to musicians like yourself who are out there in the world, meeting people, sharing your gift of song and your love for music with people. So it's always a pleasure to start my day off like that.
Well, that's very kind of you to say, and it's always a pleasure to start my day off with someone who loves music and does good interviews.
I will thank you. That's very kind of you. I love the music. That's for sure. I want to just introduce our future audience to Will Wesley, country rocker, self-promoted country rocker, right?
That's right.
And he's currently promoting his new rendition of "Go Tell It on the Mountain," just released at the end of November. And I really appreciate the opportunity to get to talk to you today.
Man, I really appreciate that as well, and share the new single with everybody.
Yeah, definitely. There's so many new Christmas songs out there. I mean, I shouldn't say there are new ones, but there's so many classic songs. So many of the classic songs that were written in like the 50s and the 60s and how did you decide to specifically record this song? Where was it in this song that you like I gotta do this?
You know, what really appealed to me about Go Tell It on the Mountain was the traditional aspects of the song combined with the gospel elements. Like you said, country rock, I've got a certain brand that I do, but I don't think a lot of my friends and supporters have heard um, my more gospel side. And I wanted to kind of fuse the country and the gospel elements to do my own version, but also keep the traditionalist value this year at Christmas. So if everything from the artwork to the single to everything we did is more in a traditional Christmas format.
Yeah, I love the cover. I mean, it does. It emulates that feeling of classic Christmas. And some of those songs were written during the war when people were missing their families,
Yes.
I'll be home for Christmas, things like that, where they're missing their families, they're trying to get back home to them. And such a different time. I think that some of the new songs that are out today are more like the dancey rock songs and, nothing wrong with that, of course, but it's just that
No,
some of those classic lyrical just that made you just, you could put yourself by a fireplace with hot chocolate in your hand and, and with family and people you care for.
that's it, man. And that's really what I wanted to go for. Like you said, there's nothing wrong with the new sound and the modern things that people are doing, but this year we kind of wanted to go classic.
Love it. I love it. Is there anybody specifically that recorded this song in the past? I mean, there's lots of covers of it. I'm going to bring a point up about that in a second. But anybody specifically that you heard record, you were like, I just love that the way they did the instrumentation or their voice or how golden their voice was. That kind of brought you to this moment too.
Yeah, actually, there was. Of all people, I actually like Josh Turner's version of "Go
Okay.
Tell It on
Yeah.
the Mountain." I thought I always really liked Josh Turner's voice. He's got that low alto baritone thing going on, and just the way that he approached it, his instrumentation was fantastic, and the way he brought in the background vocals, I really, really enjoyed Josh Turner's version. Because after we decided on it, I started listening to different versions of the song, and Josh Turner's just stuck out to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that. I mean, Josh Turner, like you said, golden voice, low voice like that.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
it was interesting. I just was, as I was going through and just looking at some of the different covers of this song, just to kind of have some conversation with you about this, it was interesting that although, like you said, most were country, most were gospel, there were a couple
Yeah.
of interesting ones that stuck out. It was also recorded by Simon and Garfunkel, um, Frank
Really?
Sinatra, and even Bob Marley. Bob Marley has a version of "Go Tell on the Mountain."
Well, I knew Sinatra did it, but I did not know that Bob Marley did the
Yeah,
version of it or Simon and Garfunkel. I never heard those. I'll have to go check that out.
I hadn't listened to those versions either. I mean, I was a music teacher for a long time, and I taught the song in for Christmas programs. I would always insert it into my Christmas programs. So I was
Yeah.
curious when I saw you doing this. I'm like, who else has done this song? And
Yeah.
and Bob Marley, I listened to it very briefly. Bob Marley's version, and the verses are completely different, but the chorus is melodically and lyrically the same. So it's interesting.
That is very, what did he do it in a reggae format?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit.
I'll
The
be darned.
background, the
I'm gonna
music
go
was
check
more
that out.
reggae, but his voice was a little more straight ahead than in some of his songs. Yeah, it was interesting. So I just thought interesting music trivia or just the interest of like how many people have really the scope of the song, how many people have really touched the song in their records.
That is very, very cool, man. I did not know Bob Marley, the father of reggae, did a "Go Tell It on the Mountain," the most traditionalist song I've ever heard. That's fantastic.
You'll have to check it out. Yeah, for sure.
I will.
um, so in your opinion, why is it that why we gravitate to Christmas songs that were written so many years ago, the classics? Because in my opinion, I mean, I don't see a lot of things changing with. I mean, all these years, new things just aren't. that same style anymore, and things change. But that was a golden period where even though we have different forms of rock and different forms of country, whatever it is, a new single comes and goes out there. We've had a couple big. I mean, I think maybe like Mariah Carey, for example, has supposedly got the biggest record for her song, you
Yeah.
know, but not in the classic style. What is it that you think we just don't hear those kinds of songs anymore?
Well, I'm gonna answer that in a two forms of ways. Number one, I really believe that people are yearning for the innocence of the past, the nostalgia that comes with it, because I really believe that people in the world today, look, let's be honest, there's a lot of depressed people out there, Kevin. There's a lot of sorrow in the world right now. The whole world is divided by politics, and people are getting to a point where in some places you can't even mention God without offending somebody. And
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
believe that there's a silent majority of people out there that just want to go back to the way it was. They want to go back to when everyone got along. They want to go back to when everything was peace and harmony. That's one aspect that I believe brings this yearning along. And the other thing is, you're a music teacher, and I'm going to go a little deeper than the surface here. Have you noticed that it seems like a lot of music after the 1980s doesn't really stick in mainstream culture? Like, let's go from the 90s to the early thousands and moving. It seems like you have some memorable songs, but a lot of the artists have just come and gone, didn't they're not sticking, if that makes any sense.
Completely.
Go back to the 80s, 70s, 60s. I mean, if I was to say, name me a legendary group or singer from the 80s, people, Michael Jackson, people would say anything, just any kind of artist. But it seems to me that from somewhere in the 90s to now, a lot of the artists just kind of they get very famous and they come out with great work, some of them, but they don't seem to stick in the minds of the long-term culture. Or is that just me noticing that, or have you?
No, I completely agree with you. I completely agree. My work is kind of threefold. I do this for fun to meet people like yourself, and I'm a musician, and I work in a concert venue, and in the past I worked for a record label. I won't mention the label,
Sure.
but I do want to say that in the '90s, and that's the time I worked in the '90s into the 2000s. I just really felt as a music fan who supported the business for years, buying records, and cassette tapes, and maybe a couple 8-track tapes, going back a little bit, but not
Going
too
back a couple years,
little
huh?
bit. I don't think I ever bought my own 8 tracks. I think they were bought for me as a kid. So I was pretty young.
Yeah, you were just listening to your grandfather's tapes,
Exactly,
8 tracks.
exactly. Right. Uh, but I always felt like there was so much they were trying to push out there, all the labels, not just the label I worked for, but all the labels. And as soon as you got people to stick to that song, it was
Yeah,
on to the next project. And so the
correct.
song would go up and go down, and you'd get your customers excited about it, and then it'd be gone.
That's right.
I kept a lot of CDs from back in those days just to share stories with my colleagues. Remember this one? Remember that one? Remember this came out? It
I,
was the biggest thing, and now it's gone. And there's not that radio establishment that there used to be. There's not, there's not the promotion is not the same. It's just not.
it's all self-promoted more than, well, it's once again in many different ways of looking at it, but a lot of artists that haven't made it or had the big promotion behind them have to get started by self-promoting. And
Yes.
what people do not realize is that when you start looking at things like social media, TikTok, all these different avenues, really what it is an avenue for self-promotion, so that once you get to a certain level, then the big labels come after you. That's just my take on it.
Oh, I agree. I
You
completely
know,
agree.
it's
And then
all
even
about
then,
streaming numbers. To me, streaming numbers and business page numbers and TikTok numbers and all this stuff is nothing more than the artist. Basically, the major labels have cut out a lot of the promo work. You do that yourself, and then they'll put the backing behind you once you get the numbers. That's what it seems like to me.
right. And the distribution, if it's going to be any kind of physical, if vinyl seems to come back a little bit,
Yeah.
CDs. I just heard the other day that they were saying that now they feel like the AI is seeping into different media, uh,
Wow.
digital media, that someone was listening to a classic. It happened to be a Christmas song, as a matter of fact. It happened to be Frosty the Snowman. They were listening to
Yeah.
a classic Christmas song, and they noticed that the voice wasn't quite the same. over and over and over. And it was determined through a bunch of different things that maybe there's a little bit of AI slipping into, so that there's tons of songs out there that aren't the initial version, but it's less expensive to have to not pay the artist. So, I mean, it's a very interesting time. Very interesting.
And it's a very scary time
It is.
for
It is.
artists that are trying to emerge because, you know, let's be honest, Kevin. I mean, I could literally have me or you, if we released a single, they literally could put AI and they would never know that it was not me or you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think the biggest thing is that having your heart in the right place. I know you're someone, just from reading about you and looking at some of your social media, someone that really cares about the people around you and trying to reach them. If you can reach them and you can support yourself, make a living, with your music, and that's, if the heart is there and you've reached people, you can tell when you see in their eyes or when they're singing back your lyrics at a show, then I call that success, in my opinion.
I agree.
In my opinion, it's success. And
I
like I said, it's
agree.
not about the numbers and the everything. It's about why you write songs. It's a even a form of therapy for ourselves when we write music. I write a little bit of music here and there. I'm not out there promoting it, but I write it. And it's nice to just it's like a way of like self healing sometimes.
That's right. Well, music is very therapeutic for me as well. I think that songwriting is what kept me growing up out of trouble, out of the streets, out of doing bad things, until eventually it just became a craft that I embraced. So I totally can relate to what you're saying.
Yeah. I was looking at some of your social media, and I noticed that when we go back to just getting the word out, that this was an interesting one, though, that you've gotten airplay as far as Australia.
Yes, yes.
That's
Yes,
amazing.
yeah, we're getting airplay pretty much all over the world. I've been hearing that we got some for 12 o'clock in Texas, my single before the Christmas. We've been getting airplay in Italy, Australia, we play in the UK, United States. So it's definitely been on the radio. We've been definitely getting out there to the great big world there.
I think that's just amazing. It's fantastic. And I think that it looks like you look at your music at a global level, anyways, because it looks like you've done some shows in Europe and Asia over the time. I don't know when in your whole trajectory that was, but I mean, it's like that's interesting that, a lot of people who are doing self promoting, it's hard to just get to Europe and Asia and perform.
Yeah, definitely been going to Europe once a year for the most part. I think in 2025 we're going to take a little time off from going there, but I've been there every year since 2021, I believe.
Wow, that's
Oh yeah.
great.
And Thailand and Asia, we went to I've been there twice as well, and pretty much I've been definitely making the rounds, touring around the United States and all over. We just got in from Nashville last night, so we've been on the road.
You were doing a Christmas for Kids event, correct?
I was, man. It was very nice. We went down to well, it's actually Hendersonville, Tennessee. We went down and we were doing bus events for Christmas for kids, which is where they line out all these tour buses and you go on there and you just meet the kids and give them candy and give them autographs and things like that. And it was nice to actually bring a family environment to this music business. It can get a little sterile sometimes.
Oh, for sure.
It was a very nice event. I very much enjoyed it.
And it kind of took you full circle to when you were younger and saw Garth Brooks.
Hey, you read about that? Yeah. It really did, man. Like when I was a kid, one of a funny story about this is here in where I live in Walker, Louisiana. If you go just no piece down the road, there is a place called Old Creek Western Store, Bear Creek. And when I was a kid, this is very true. Garth Brooks was doing a show in this area and was meeting people at the Bear Creek Western Store.
Wow.
And when I was a kid, I went and got on. I was just remember being in such awe of seeing his bus and actually going on the bus and meeting Garth Brooks. And
Yeah.
back in them years, he was famous, but he wasn't what he was going to be yet.
Right,
And
right.
I'm not going to be telling my age either. It wasn't quite an 8-track tapes, but it was close enough. But actually going on the bus and meeting him and just realizing that he's just a very everyday nice guy.
Yeah.
He was literally eating dinner and said, "Hey guys, come on up on the bus," and we met him and he's talked with us for about 5 minutes or so, and then he was talking about how he had a big show he was doing. And I remember feeling like that was just so exciting, like a Christmas present. And
Yeah.
to see that look on kids' faces 2 days ago at that event and coming back. It was just a very nostalgic feeling, but it was also, it reminded me of how I felt as a kid, and to see that in their face was very special.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure that's so neat to take that full circle of that experience.
Yeah, it really is, man. It really is.
Do you think that now that you've written this, I mean, that you've re-recorded this song, do you have any interest in maybe recording a full Christmas album at some point down the road?
I've definitely thought about it. But what I would like to do is write my own Christmas songs.
Yeah,
I'd like to do a full album of a Will Wesley Christmas, where perhaps I write every song on the album. And I'm a bit of I guess, a creative guy. I'd like to make it some kind of concept album, following a character from the beginning to the end of some kind of Christmas story.
that's exciting. I mean, that's how I think in my head. But I'm thinking, well, where would I go with something like that? You're out there doing it. Dude, I envy that. I think it's great. It's neat that I've always thought that the concept album process was kind of a neat thing to pursue. So that's exciting.
Well, thank you, my friend. It's something I definitely am looking forward to getting to work on in the near future.
Great, great. I know you said briefly that you released the song 12 O'Clock in Texas before you start promoting this song. I thought maybe you could speak a little bit on that song in your writing of that, the meaning of that song.
Absolutely. Yeah, 12 o'clock in Texas is it's one of the most honest and personal songs I ever wrote. And I got to be honest with you. It's the first song I've ever written where the song and the music video come together to tell the actual whole story. It's a collaboration between the song and the music video. And the true story behind it is about my brother, Daniel Dale. Daniel and me were very, very close growing up as kids, and up until his death, of course. But Daniel developed a habit. It's a very dark story, and I hate that, but it's to be candid about it. Daniel got hooked on heroin, and I seen a man go from making 150, $200,000 a year to basically bumming money off of me just to try to get by, living in the streets and begging for anything he can get. And, you know, I let him come with us. I tried to bring him on the road and tried to get him away from the environment that he was getting all these drugs, because that's just something I've never done. I had a bout with alcohol, but I've overcome that years ago. And seeing him just go from up to down that quickly was very difficult. But what ends up happening is, being on the road with us, his addiction finally got so bad that I took him to rehab out in Marksville, Louisiana, and he got clean for a month there. And I remember there's certain elements, if you watch the video, you'll see like I'm always twirling a sobriety coin. And the reason being is, for some people, a sobriety coin, and what it should be, and for a lot of people it is, it's a token of accomplishment, of freedom. You've overcome this addiction. But for me, it was just a token of a system that let my brother down. He got out of rehab, and I remember him being, I'd seen excitement in him that I hadn't seen in years, that he thought if he presented this sobriety coin, because he had gotten in a lot of trouble and he knew that he was going to be facing some legal problems.
Mm,
And I remember him feeling like if he could just present this sobriety coin, that they would understand and allow him to try to stay clean.
yeah.
But they didn't. And that's understandable. You got to face your past. But I remember this just broke Daniel's spirit, to the point of, I remember trying to talk to him and say, well, look, Dan, you're just going to have to face your time. That's, you have to man up and face the things you've done, but there still is a brighter day ahead for you.
Right.
And I remember when he got out of my vehicle, and he left, when I started to drive, I looked down and noticed that he had just left that sobriety coin. And um about a week later, I was on a show when I got the call that Dan had overdosed in a hotel room in Baton Rouge. And a lot of people have asked me, why 12 o'clock in Texas if y'all live in Baton Rouge? Well, because the truth of the song is that, not knowing how to deal with his loss, I just kept working and I went on tour the very next week. In Galveston, Texas is where I was at doing a show. And I was heading home from that show one night, and I'm telling you, a gale force wind. It was a complete clear night. It nearly knocked our vehicle off the road. And I remember feeling like, man, this is bizarre. And I looked over at my bandmate, and he goes, "It's a completely clear night. What's going on?" And I just blurted out. I said, "Well, that's the spirit of my brother saying goodbye." And I woke up the next morning and I began to write the lyrics that will become 12 o'clock in Texas. And once I wrote it, I began to realize that, I wrote the song from the perspective of what was going on around me after his loss in the aftermath. So, what I decided to do when it came time to film the music video was create a video starting from childhood and concluding with his death and talking about not only how his death was a tragedy, but how it affected me as a person, in hopes that it would help anyone else and shine the light on addiction as a whole, and trying to really light up the darkness that is swept under the rug. And that's really the goal behind 12 o'clock in Texas.
So hopefully this song will reach so many people that really need to hear that message. And it's a form of therapy in your life as you wrote
Yeah.
it, I'm sure that, and as you continue to sing it, perform it, that it's reaching people. You'll probably, the song potentially will spark lots of letters and notes and you'll know that you've reached people that needed to hear it. And that what other, we talk about success. To me, that's success.
You know, that's a very true statement. It's not about the money or anything like that. It's about the message,
Right.
and it's a very bizarre thing. This is the first interview that I gave where I'm going to share a very recent story that reminds me of. I don't want to. I know a lot of listeners are not wanting to hear about God, but it's the only explanation that I can give here. You know, Talking about addiction, I was on the way to this Christmas for Kids event this week, and a couple of bizarre incidences found me in a place that I can't explain it. And this is so true. I'm driving in from Natchez, Mississippi. I had a show down there. I was doing a house concert. And I decided just before I made my run into Nashville, which is about 9 hours away, that I was going to get an oil change on my vehicle. I go there and I'm telling you all these details because when I finish, you're going to say, "Holy, what?" I go to this mechanic shop and they say, "Will, your car is bone dry of oil." And I said, "What?" I said, "That's amazing." I said, I almost didn't even come in. I just decided to do this on a whim. Fill it up. He said, "Yeah, I'm gonna fill it up, but there could be something wrong with the engine. Where are you headed?" I said, "I'm going to Nashville." And they said, "Well, you need to keep an eye on your oil just to make sure it's not leaking out." Well, that made me decide to stop sooner at gas stations to check the oil. And I left at 4 in the morning and I started driving. And about 30 minutes down the road, I said, "You know what? I'm just going to pull in. I'm going to stop and I'm going to get fuel now and I'm going to check the oil." When checking the oil, I said, "I'm going to let the car sit for about 10 or 15 minutes just to let it all seat down." So I went to use the restroom. When I walk in this restroom, a man is collapsed in the stall with a belt tied around his arm. And from experiences of my own brother, I knew this man's overdosed. So I immediately run out, tell the clerk at the desk, call and get the ambulance. And to the best of my knowledge, they revived and saved this man's life.
Oh my goodness.
And I just drove off. And here's the strange thing about it. Let's think of outside the box.
Mhm.
If I wouldn't have just something inside of me decided to go get an oil change when I didn't even think I was going to, and they didn't scare me with the oil leakage, I would have never stopped at that station and found this fella, and perhaps he could have passed on and died from that. And here's the real strange thing. On the whole drive to Nashville and back, my car didn't lose a drop of oil.
Oh, that's really intense. I mean,
It's a true story. Yeah.
I call that like a God wink is what I call it in a sense. It is like a God wink. There's a whole book about them. It's kind of a God wink because you think about all the timing. Like you said, if you hadn't had a reason to stop, that man might not be here with us. And so
Yeah.
all those things, and it's not coincidence. I,
It
I just
can't
don't
be.
believe that.
I always believed in the spiritual and of Jesus Christ and all that, but I'm also a very hardcore factual kind of guy as well. And there comes a question, I think, in everybody's life where we ask the question, are things so coincidental that there are no coincidences at all? Remains the question. Is it so coincidental that it can't be a coincidence? That's just a question for the theorist out there.
I'll be thinking about that all day today. I will. I mean, that's very, it really is something that.
Yeah.
I I know you've got a busy morning. I know you've got another one right behind me. It's some more time to talk about these songs. I would love to talk to you again at some point. Um,
Yes. Yes.
a little bit about some of the music you've done in the past, and let our future audience know you're a very interesting musician with a lot to say that will be in your words on your music and also in a format like this where you will reach people. You really will. I know you will.
Well, God bless you, man, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate you letting me come on your show and talk about some of these stories and for playing the new music and just having me here. I really appreciate you for that and all your viewers and listeners. I do.
It's absolutely my pleasure. I looking at some of your social media. I just encourage anyone who's watching this interview to go and check out. Very active with your social media. I think you were on Facebook every day in December. I didn't go back further and further and further, but I sure if I go
Yeah.
back, you're keeping busy on there.
Oh yeah.
And so you'll people will find you, and you have a website
Yep.
specific. I saw you have a couple different ones. So I wasn't sure which one is the one that would really be where people should be looking at.
The most common one is just willwesleymusic.com. You can find my shows, my tour dates, and all my upcoming obligations and aspirations there. You can also check me out anywhere you stream your music. It doesn't matter if it's Spotify, Pandora, Apple, I'm there, just Will Wesley. And you could go to YouTube and also check out my music videos. I write all my own scripts and all that. So you can kind of get a creative take on some of these songs. Just YouTube Will Wesley. You can check out the new video, 12 o'clock in Texas there as well.
That's wonderful. Um, I got a really quick question for you offline, and take me
Sure.
10 seconds. And so I just want to thank you again for your time to our audience, and hope to get to talk to you again soon.
Well, man, I really do. I appreciate being here and I hope to talk with you again as well. I would love that.
Thank you, Will. Thanks so much.
Thank you, my friend.